Good afternoon. I will be chairing the next session. For those who haven't seen me yet, my name is Valentijn. This session will be about the target Fieldlab. And many of you probably have never heard about it. The Dutch people have heard about Fieldlab in the context of a lot of experiments with concerts and things during the pandemic. So Fieldlab became a Dutch word, more or less. But this is another Fieldlab, which we are presenting this afternoon, which is the target Fieldlab. It's one of my babies. You heard my talk. Most of you will have heard my talk about weak lensing, and that we started with weak lensing, collecting data about 20 years ago, preparing for it, which made us big data experts, and which made us also develop the Oosterwoud information system. And that's actually 20 years ago that we started working on that. And it was perceived rather quickly in a couple of years. And then the Oosterwoud data system was ready to go, but there was no telescope. The telescope arrived in 1,000 pieces in Chile, so there was a big delay. And we thought, well, you know, we have all this fantastic stuff in our information system. And then we started a new program, waiting for OmegaCam to come online. We started a new program, and we got an enormous amount of money for that to transfer the knowledge of the universities to companies. So we had collaborations also with IBM and Oracle and the big companies and smaller companies. And we exported, so to speak, our WISE technology. And I can say now that the same technology is now also used for the Euclid satellite. So this technology, which was built 20 years ago, is still alive and kicking. One of the properties of Oosterwoud is that you can, for any data product, you can trace back how it has been made. And you know how complex weak lensing is. There are all these different calibrations and biases and systematics which can go into. So that was really needed for weak lensing studies, that you can go back to all the calibrations. And this is all modeled in a database in Oracle. And it goes sometimes 20 levels deep. So this is tracing back to the source of the data. Well, there are many other aspects of Oosterwoud. I'm not going to dwell on all of them. Clearly, it was ready for distributed data, distributed processing, and dealing with big data. Actually, the word big data was not invented at the moment we made it. So it's now being used by Euclid, for Euclid, and Rhys Williams, you have seen him undoubtedly, is our technical project manager for Euclid, and he applies this in the Euclid consortium with 9 data centers and 200 institutes. It's becoming huge. It's a major job for Rhys to get all these people together. But also for Euclid, we are waiting. And so that was the onset for, well, you know, we have this technology, let's put it in, what is in Dutch word called valorization. Let's apply it in industry. So I'm not going to tell all these projects. I'm going to tell a little bit about this session. We will have a little bit about the target Fieldlab. The target Fieldlab is a reincarnation of the original target program. We got a sack of money to help companies to apply our technology or our vision, how to deal with technology, how to deal with data in an industrial environment. And so we are doing that. I can say that today, well, we had talks about it earlier in the previous conferences. Today, there will be a focus on 2 parts. One part is what I call the Facts and Fakes program, which is now becoming a booming topic in governments because it's about disinformation. We started with this about 5 years ago. We worked intensively with Elsevier for optimizing the refereeing process with machine learning. And don't think that we are going to replace the referee, but this was a technique to help the referees to quicker do the analysis of papers. In that process, we developed a team and at the university, and a continuation of this work with Elsevier is our Facts and Fakes program, which we do together with Ruurd and Ruurd Oosterwoud is the founder and the chair of DORC, and he's going to give us a presentation on his work in a minute. Why this is relevant for scientists is that I just explained that in Asterwise we are modeling all the data back to the source, back to the telescope in our case. There's all these different levels and steps and things in the relations. Well, a good journalist learns that if he publishes something, he has to go back to the source. But in journalism, this is not modeled yet, right? This is just a little bit going here and there and try to find something. So this was the, the idea. Well, let's apply our technology also to this topic, and let's help people who are really wanted to invent or investigate what is the source of this so-called disinformation. To make clear, we are not going to take corrective action, that is for others to do, but we are just helping companies to make that technology work. So that's one part of the this afternoon. The other part is that, well, I've been a little bit smart by also including this theater in the Fieldlab. So to be honest, you are part of the Fieldlab. You're sitting in the middle of a Fieldlab event. And actually the Fieldlab is also a sponsor of this conference. The Fieldlab, in this context, we are doing, inserting new technology here in this theater. We're working in open space, which is a new technology to project on the domes. We're quite advanced, but we're still one step away from using it for a conference like this. And well, we do many different things. So we innovate here in this theater. Really, it's the idea to stay up to date with modern technology. So there will be two presentations on this work. And I think I've already taken too much time. So I'm now going to hand over the microphone to you're ready to go. It's your 40 minutes.
Thanks. Thanks, Edwin. My name is Ruurd. I'm not an academic. I'm an entrepreneur by accident because I studied Russian studies back in 2014, did my master's in Leiden University. And while doing that, Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time, and it made me so frustrated that when I was reading Russian news, Dutch news, other news, that there were so many lies and nobody ever said sorry. And I thought, I want to get to the bottom of that and then come up with solutions. So by accident, we created some projects that turned into successful projects, that turned into businesses, that turned into something that we try now to be sort of creating as many smart data-driven interventions against disinformation that we can. I'm going to give you, initially I was supposed to give you 3 examples of our data-driven projects, but one of them will be talked about by Herbert after me, so I'll skip that. The other thing, turns out we can't share any data yet because it's still a very secret project. So I decided to just give you a closer look to all the things that we are thinking about. We try to be next generational thinkers in the field of disinformation. I'm hoping to learn from you today, actually, on what you actually think of our ideas, and then maybe that could grow into something better. Do we have a problem? Yes. And now I'm wondering if I click this button, if it will start. No. There's no more buttons on the thing. So what I wanted to show you, maybe if I click here, something might work. Can I click this technique? Yeah. Is this, oh, sorry. Reject all, never cookies. Yeah.
Do you have your presentation?
It's here.
And if you click on it?
It opened the browser.
Okay.
But it's not that, no, because it was, my intention was to show you an example of how, like, 80–90% of the field of counter disinformation is talking about disinformation, and then tell you that the problem is not disinformation, but the people trying to do something against it in most of the times. Because in like the last 6–7 years of a rapidly growing field of counter disinfo, the main definition that they came up with is that you have something that they call mal, mis, disinformation. So the misinformation is unintentionally spread disinformation, and the disinformation is intentionally spread. And that makes a whole difference. But it's problematic in two different ways. It's linear, and how do we ever prove intent? If someone is anti-vax and spreading a message intentionally, but also believing that it is the truth, is that then disinformation or missing? The whole concept is so complex and blurry in a way that this journalist, actually, I really recommend reading this article. Joseph Bernstein for HARPERS magazine wrote, "The most comprehensive survey of the field to date, a 2018 scientific literature review, reveals some gobsmacking deficits. The authors fault disinformation research for failing to explain why opinions change, lacking solid data on the prevalence and reach of disinformation, and they can't even define common definitions of the problem." Now, and we completely agree with Joseph. Now, I think 80 or 90% of the field does not agree with him, because they are what he calls, and I really like that, big disinfo. Because there's a whole industry growing where there is platform money, there is fact-checker journalists, there is philanthropies that all support each other, policymakers trying to do something without infringing on privacy of their citizens. And that is just building up a very big pool of money that's being pumped around, and it has no to zero effect. We are not really fond of fact-checking as a thing. That is not meaning that there is no use for it in any way, but we'll get to that later. The whole problem of seeing disinformation as like what a fact-checker does and what the linear approach is that you have a sender, you have an agent, a message, and an interpreter, a receiver. And this is a model that is used by the main fact-checking organization right now still. So the for you, that is the left one. That is completely linear, and it makes no sense at all, because we all know that when you actually are sending messages, the receiver can become a sender themselves. There is much more into it than just the message. The whole construct is much more a belief system based on non-linear and social behavioral patterns than actually just a linear psychological way. Now, the way that we see the internet, it is much more problematic to do something against disinformation or the problems of disinformation, online manipulation, in what way you actually can influence people, than being the fact checker in the middle, who's sort of collecting the fakes. But as I was intrigued by Charlie's comments on unuseful truths, and I think a fact check is in many ways a very unuseful truth, because it will tell you the truth, but nobody will actually take notice and do something with it. So we need to find very different ways of actually doing something against manipulation online, instead of trying to just spread more facts. Because the thing that we've been doing for the past 6 years is sort of nothing, because nobody really likes to work together. When they work together, there's the big disinfo things coming out of, for instance, there's now European digital media observatories all over Europe that should then sort of gather disinformation narratives and then spread that in systems. And then I don't know what they're doing, but they will have a lot of power, and it's a sort of it feels good for policymakers to do something about it, but it does not have any effect. So when I try to talk about what we do, we came up with this model. Now, this is just a week-old model, so it's brand new. But we had problems defining what it is that we actually do. Then we came up with this idea of those different generations of solutions against disinformation at this moment. So the Gen 1 was funding journalism. I worked as a research intern at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2015. And at that moment, everybody was completely clear about it. Disinformation is only a problem for Eastern Europe because we have very solid media systems here in the West. So if we fund Eastern European independent journalists, the problem will be solved. So that was back then. Then generation 2 became, hey, we're seeing Russian disinformation growing as they enter Ukraine. We should do something about that. And we saw this whole fact-checking community come up. The problem there still is that facts won't persuade. So most of the things done right now is still Gen 2 solutions. Now, we're trying to be the Gen 3, Gen 4, maybe even Gen 5 solution thinkers. Because everything changed after Trump got into office, and we had populists in office that also had no clear they didn't mind staying away from truth when it was actually helpful for them. So the platforms became more central, and this is where the solution should be, and blocking and deplatforming, etc. And how many people are happy that Trump is not on Twitter anymore? But can we actually sort of can we explain to anyone why we did that and why that is actually I mean, can we explain that to our kids, why we blocked this one guy and now we're all happy because, yeah, we didn't really know why, but it helped a bit. I mean, we need to have better solutions to the problems and the solutions that we're seeing right now. So I'll be giving you some examples of the next gen things that we are thinking about. Some of them we've already done. Some of them are just brain farts that we have because we'd like to brain fart every week and have a session for that, because you can only come up with new ideas. Well, you need to come up with a new idea every week, but it also, what we as a business also find out, it is difficult being next gen bleeding edge, because as 80 or 90% of the field is just not ready for you, we try to build a sort of fellowship of the ring of people that get it, and then be very proud of each other that we all get it so well, and then nobody does anything with the products that we make, because we have to wait for about 5 years before that becomes common knowledge. So this is us, next gen solutions to disinformation, bleeding edge, valorization, data driven. We try to become a sort of bounty-driven DAO, if that makes any sense to any one of you, but it's cool. It means that we try to do what is normal in cybersecurity, where you have just bounties for clearing tasks, but we can do that for stuff for normal, regular, like write a proposal for a grant. Why can't we do that in a bounty? And we do everything internationally. So yes, we're Dutch, but we try to be as little Dutch as possible. And we are a social business because we believe that we should do good and get well by doing good, and not think about getting well first and then try to do any good. Back in 2018, I had to write an article for a conference at the European Parliament, and we called it the Bad News Manifesto. And that is over 4 years ago, and it is still really something that we stand behind, and it is still something that was really new back then, and is still becoming more normal. But what we wrote there is that facts are obsolete, in the sense that if you look at the internet and about what truths are considered truths, it is a completely social construct. I mean, you can really be proud of knowing the real truth, but it won't matter if it's not fitting into the social construct. So there's more to it. The other thing is that when you have these belief systems and a lot of people believe something that is untrue, they become your biggest problem, but they are also your biggest victim. So instead of bashing them and blocking them and deplatforming them, we need to do something else. So, and the internet never was a sacred place, and please don't think that we can make it. I mean, the real world was never a sacred place, and we haven't managed that in the past, well, couple of million years. And what we need to do is create our playing field, in the sense that we need to come up with something that is as entertaining as disinformation, but less harmful. So, I mean, it is a question of demand, and it is a market. There is a demand for disinformation, and there is a production of disinformation, and those two meet. So when we try to stop production of disinformation, there's still demand. People like to read lies. People like to be part of a group. So what can we actually come up with to do something that will help those people and at the same time be as entertaining as possible? So the first thing that we did was something very entertaining. Now, this is not fake or anything. This is Jan Rosenbeek. Yeah, that is because he's our main guy in Cambridge. Also used to drink beer and study Russian with him back in the days. But he went to do his PhD in Cambridge, and at that moment we were thinking about creating a game where you have to become the bad guy and make as much disinformation as possible, and then learn about the techniques. Which is something that he actually turned into academic a work field that it's called inoculation theory, that they're researching at the social decision-making lab at Cambridge. And because we had a practical tool, the game, they suddenly had a very, very handy research tool that got him, well, this was we launched that game, and we had about 100,000 people play the game, and most of them filled in a pre and post survey for them to do research. So this is us trending on Reddit, and the game is like, you have 6 chapters. Can you see hands of anyone who knows about bad news? One. Oh, that's Herbert. Okay, shit. No, so we created this game, and the fun thing is that people like it. Even Reddit likes it, which is quite an achievement, just to make something that Reddit likes. Here's some picture of. So there's an effect study of the. So what we did was not topical rebuttal, but technical rebuttal. So we looked at techniques of disinformation, put that into the chapters, and then checked if people were actually better at recognizing fake experts or using emotion or using conspiracy theories. And even though you don't see much of a difference, apparently this is significant, but it actually helps out. So I'm not the researcher here, but I always use a number of 20% increased resilience against disinformation when people play this game for 15 minutes. Now that is a much larger and actually data-driven understanding of the effectiveness of something, other than, because if you look at the field and all the NGOs, there's so many NGOs doing media literacy and helping people understand disinformation, and like, oh, you should check your sources. All those projects, they measure how many people they've reached, and that is your impact. So we should do much more of this. So actually, what we're trying to, this is the retention, so it sticks. That's fun as well. What we try to achieve is actually doing the same assessment, but then on all different interventions, trying to get people to get more resilient and make a sort of matrix. So this is also a mock-up, a 5-minute mock-up I've been using for a year already, but it still looks nice. The categories are like completely irrelevant, but trying to map out what kind of interventions help on what kind of people at what kind of times, so that we actually have something that is more real-time applicable to audiences and groups of people online. Now here's the next thing. So that was the games. We sold the games to it's one of our subsidiaries, Tilt. Howard will be talking about Tilt as well. They also do other stuff. I'll be talking about a little later. But the games are working, they're done. We went on to do something new. One of the things that we looked into is like, that whole definitional model of disinformation makes no sense. So how can we come up with something better that targets actually sort of a transactional model where we can look at disinformation in a different way? So this is a baker. As you can see, this is the economics, this is the business model of a baker. He will have a contract with a miller, he will give him money and he will get flour. And so this whole transactional model is the minimum amount of transactions that a baker needs to become a pensioner in the end. So you can add more, but this is the essentials. Now, what if we take that to a case study of disinformation? So this is the story about Veles, North Macedonia. Back in the days, 2016, Veles was very, very much in the news because I believe it was about 50% of all disinformation on Hillary Clinton originated from Veles, North Macedonia, a small provincial town in North Macedonia. Because the definition of Hillary Clinton disinformation should be sort of intentionally hurting, harmful disinformation to influence the election. So it's pure disinformation, right? I mean, yeah, it makes sense. But we flew over to Veles. We had some people with family in the same village, and we had some beers with them, and we talked. And what it turned out is that they just wanted a BMW 4 Series. That's like his dream. And what they did was they sold supplement pills online. So the first transaction is giving traffic, getting money from a supplement pill distributor. Now, the thing that they created was they had halls full of teenagers, local teenagers, that spent every weekend just writing up messages. And so they had sock puppets that they paid money for. Now, the thing that they did better than the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg was that instead of thinking that they were good at speaking English, they understood that they were very bad at it. And if you want to convince people, you don't even need to speak proper English, you need to speak slang. So what they did was they used TaskRabbit or any of the Fiverr, Upwork, other platforms that you can use to get someone to translate your work. They made rough English into slang, and they paid for that. So they just got like, hey, this is the message, and then they got 10 different variations on a theme in local slang, like Chicago style, Texas style, whatever you want. And then they started posting those on YouTube and Facebook. And the more followers they got, the more traffic they got, the more money they got. And in the end, because they already had their BMW, what did they do? They found out writing stuff about Hillary Clinton increases traffic, increases money. Is that like the evil genius there? No, it was just a business transaction. Why would you not write about Hillary Clinton if it would make you millions more? They became sort of millionaires. They bought their own nightclubs in this town. What Facebook did was they shut down the entire, like every page that ever was that originated from Veles, North Macedonia was deleted. So healthy food, there was the page of our contacts there that had about 2 million followers and sold supplement pills, was gone. Now, is that the solution to this problem, or can we look at transactions in this model that might actually make more sense? Because blocking stuff, I mean, they are angry right now. And in the meantime, they dug a tunnel to Sofia, Bulgaria, and put in optic fiber. So they're now originating from the EU. Smart move. So if we look at these transactions, for instance, if you're looking at the TaskRabbit transaction, like you're sending this information to be translated into native slang, that might be something that you could sort of automatically detect as a TaskRabbit, that you would say like, oh, we're not going to pursue, or this transaction cannot go through because it will support a disinformation network. Or what if we just like stop the selling of supplement pills for 2 months around every election? There would be no problem anymore. So when you think outside the box, there's different options. There's different well, and especially when you categorize different sort of basic forms of disinformation in a transactional model like this, it makes so much more sense than this mall miss this information. Another thing, and this is the secret thing I wanted to talk a lot about, but everybody knows the matrix probably, and to learn something in the matrix, there's the construct, and in the construct you can test anything like jumping off a building, and we thought like this whole lack of what is the effect on a population, or does it affect your voting process? Like, will you vote differently after being injected with disinformation? There is no, I don't know any paper at this moment that will give you a clear answer to that. So we decided to build our own fake Twitter. It's a Mastodon instance, and we have that filled with a lot of people and bots and whatever. And what we're trying to do is have a fictitious environment where there will be elections, and then people will vote, and we'll have different control groups, and we can actually sort of get to a number of using disinformation, or like even using fact checks against the disinformation will help you at a X percentage of influence campaign. Well, 2 months, and then it will be published. Jon is actually doing the research, so any of the papers that were published on the games and on other stuff that we've been doing on inoculation theory, you should look up Rosenbeek. That is Rozenbeek. So, but we initially built this environment because we were talking with the ambassador of Ukraine, which is back in the days when everything was still fun and happiness, who said, we will provide you full assistance in targeting us in a controlled environment, which is fun because we should do more of those red team tests where we can actually sort of come up with well, understanding the mind of somebody who would like to influence, or in any way sort of eventually stumble upon influence, and see what we can do against it already. Now, here's also another thing. Governance. In the Netherlands, we've had some problems, for instance, with the NCTV, the National Terrorism Coordinator. We had the Ministry of Defense. We had civil servants from municipalities that were all illegally obtaining information from the internet, either by monitoring or getting into closed Facebook groups from their while they were actually acting as a professional, a civil servant. And there's a new set of laws coming, like the Digital Services Act, that will have a very big impact on this whole information sphere, like GDPR did, and GDPR is a mess. DSA is coming up, and we thought, let's do something that we can already sort of implement and create new protocols for doing monitoring on disinformation in a different way than is harmful. And how can we do it smart, and how can we set something up? So we decided to set up GADAM, because GADAM is the global authority on disinformation analysis and monitoring. And how can we actually sort of, because we can create a new authority, but how do we get people to accept it? Because also, like with fact checks, we can say, yeah, but the New York Times fact checked this, but who am I to accept the authority of the New York Times? And there's a lot of people who don't. So how can we come up with a way that somebody will accept GADAM as their authority? Now, this is something that we're trying to work on. We're working on it with Deloitte at the moment as well, in trying to get well, you see the word DAO again, the decentralized autonomous organization. How can we get a sort of we the people of the internet vehicle that can vote on any protocols that are designed, for instance, by a DSA. Now that is a whole long, I don't know if we're ever going to get there, but it is we'd like to strive to make something like that happen. But this is basically just the rest of the structure is commonly for any audit organization. Okay, next new thing. We haven't really worked on this. We use an AI to come up with new ideas as well. That's really fun. It's just a Jasper AI. We just tell it a crazy idea and it will actually explain to you why it's a good idea. And that is really fun. So we make a lot of blog posts. And one of the last blog posts was this. That is the next level of what we should be doing against disinformation, is see it as pollution. So why can't we tax any organization that contributes to pollution of our truth environment? Because we know, for instance, we shouldn't block it, but we can tax it. Because taxing is not making, I mean, we don't really, nobody really likes taxes, but you don't feel excluded by paying taxes. So if we can include every organization that actually is making a lot of profit from this information, but we tax them, we have a much better, it's not really a stick, but we do have more data on what organizations are actually doing anything. We can target specific transactions, like with the TaskRabbit. We can say, it's okay if you translate this information text and localize them, but there's a higher tax rate on it. It is an idea. It needs testing. It needs more ideas. And if anyone here in the audience thinks that is a cool bounty I want to take up, you're welcome. So if anyone is like, we have a lot of ideas. So if you've had enough, just say so as well, because I'll have like 3 more ideas, and then it's the when I talk to investors, I always find out that they think that one person can only have one good idea, and then you fund them. And then when one person has more than 2 good ideas, they're probably all crappy. But this is something we've done already, but this is a fun thing. But it also shows how there's a system, a bigger market that is using disinformation or making money from disinformation, even unintentionally. So when back in the days, we used to do workshops for high schools as well. And one of our workshops was, you can write your own fake news article. We have this fake news website, the Dutch Post, and you just write your title. We made a little machine for them, so you could just write title, select image, 3 sentences of text, and I mean, we already had the slogan "reliable by tradition," etc. You could choose your own title, job title, and we could even you could alter the amount of likes that it would have, etc. And then we told those kids, like, okay, you can put it online, just push publish. But you need to get as many people to the website as possible. So they shared it everywhere on their Twitters, Instagrams, WhatsApps, and this is the top one that we ever had. Everybody who clicks on it gets a message, actually. So it's not contagious. Everybody who clicks on it, like, you've been fooled by 2 14-year-olds, do something about it. But this message, this article had 800,000 unique visitors in one day. So that is 5% of the Dutch population. It was written in Dutch originally. So 5% of the Dutch population clicked on something that children created. I think children had fun. People clicked on it, had fun, because they were like, oh, fuck, I've been fooled by 2 14-year-olds. We could do something with it, but in the meantime, a lot of organizations like beach bars, etc., started pushing the message around as well, because they would get more real life traffic to their beach bars. We used to do this with boards of high level companies. Weaponize the puppy. Just create any slogan, memify the puppy, and it becomes an emotional weapon. So like we were doing this once with a Muslim woman who said, she wrote down like, as long as Muslims are alive, this puppy will die. And I mean, so it makes you like, yeah, it's very easy, but it generates awareness. And one of the last things that I'm going to talk about, how much time do I still have? Just check. Almost at the end. Okay, that's cool. We tried to come up with we tried to build the first Dutch troll army. So it was called the annual Supreme League of Masters of Disinformation. And of course, we couldn't do that alone. We needed specialists. So we flew in from St. Petersburg, Lyudmila Savchuk, who had worked at the Internet Research Agency, to help us build the first Dutch troll army. And to achieve what, you think? To attack the European elections. So we even had people in from the European Parliament, and it was fun. But we also found out that, yeah, well, it takes a lot of work to get, well, the right people together, in the sense that maybe just the Dutch aren't good enough at creating troll factories. But yeah, and so this is my last slide. Fact checking. Checking for tactics and techniques, technical rebuttal. I think that is what we should be aiming for when we're looking at the fact-checking problem. And this is something that we tried to accomplish 2 years ago. We started because we thought there's elections coming, and none of the ministries actually understands anything about inauthentic behavior online. Like, okay, they have communication teams that check how many messages, like what is trending and how many people liked it and did they retweet it. Nobody understands the systems behind it. Like what we saw with, for instance, Dotan, the famous Dutch singer who had 140 accounts, used that to promote himself and become actually the best paying Dutch singer, built on a troll factory. How can you discover things like that and actually sort of tell a Ministry of Interior, hey, we're seeing patterns here, but we don't want to draw any conclusions, but I think you should know. Because in the end, drawing conclusions on if something is true or not, or some person is behind it, or an organization, that should be done by journalists. So you need this sort of trias politica for getting the right data, and then also getting the other people to make conclusions out of that data. But you can't do that only on your own, and you can never do that solely as a government. So you need public-private partnerships where actually an organization like ours can actually do that scraping data comparison, and this is something that Herbert will be talking about. And then actually be able to send out a message to a government that is very limited in data, but gives them an understanding of what is really happening in a country. So we did that, and it was successful. And we've been doing that for COVID monitoring as well. But I'll stop here because that is something mainly done by Tilt, which is one of our subsidiaries, and Herbert will be talking about that right now.
Time for questions.
Yep. You mentioned in between lines this Jasper AI, which can basically reason out any story for you. Did you read Douglas Adams?
Yes, I believe so.
There's a similar kind of program in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. So I thought it kind of scary that it now exists.
We were also thinking about, because there is still a demand for fact checks, but we can make a sort of recipe for Jasper that will just do basically all of the work, but then also include the tech checking. So in the sense that the tactics and the other systems involved in your belief system instead of just the informational part. We're working on that. Pitch that to the government. They like it.
Okay, thank you.
Peter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for the presentation. I have two remarks. First one, I'm very much worried about, when you say this is the truth, that's the truth. There's always a context within something that's really true or not true. Particularly when you talk about social systems, they are massively complex, and there's all these feedback loops going on. And so that brings me to the second remark. How did that work? That brings me to the second remark, which is like, for instance, your example of taxing disinformation. This might bring a lot of people on the idea, hey, I can actually earn money with it. The people that are already doing that, okay, they're always them. But there are a lot of people just looking around for new ways to get money. Once you start taxing it, then it becomes an official business, and you can create many more of those groups. So I think what I want to say and maybe ask, and I'm not sure whether it's a question or a remark, this is very dangerous what you're doing. It's very dangerous. First of all, you assume that you know the truth at some point in time, which I don't think that's hard to really get there. And the second thing is you start to do intervention in a system which is massively complex, and you cannot oversee the feedback loops.
True, but on the one hand, I think everything that's already happening will happen, and it will only grow more intense if there's money to be made. And on the second thing, why don't we start testing it in a controlled environment and just see if it works? I'm interested in looking at it in a different. There's a lot of people who asked us about the games, like, isn't it dangerous that you're teaching people how to create disinformation? And but it's like karate. There's a lot of people who do karate, but they don't go out on the street kicking people because they know how they do it. No, but I get your concerns, but it's the right question. But I think doing nothing or doing even more hurtful, because blocking stuff, etc., will also have a backlash effect. So you're also interfering in social systems. So any intervention will have a backlash, and let's find the one with the least backlash.
Maybe we need to do more research before we do interventions.
Yeah.
Leon.
So I think there's also a very basic assumption here, right? That we feel that right, these fakes are increasing. But in fact, I think if we go back into history, right, it's always been there. It's probably actually been much worse in the past. But I think, right, our awareness of it is increasing now, right? And I think that's the best weapon against it, is actually we are currently aware that we're being duped by whatever is, right, information is coming to us all the time, right? And that creates already right, a weapon against it. Whereas in the past, we would simply swallow the information. So I think if you would apply some of your maybe methods of identifying it and go back into history and go through the newspapers, etc., you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked by, right, how much we were duped in the past and simply accepted it as truth. So I think the strongest weapon is actually, right, creating awareness amongst people, not maybe giving them all the tools, but I think that awareness is the strongest tool.
I think to the basis of that is that we're seeing a decentralization of information and authority in that regard. Like, there's no gatekeepers because everybody can become a sort of gatekeeper of themselves. And that in that regard, we need to understand that the recipients need to sort of better understand the way authority now works in those decentralized systems. But and one of the most important parts, and that's the where I think information is less important than social and behavioral elements. Like when you go on Twitch, for instance, you can see a lot of people just shouting like, "Hey, we're Russians. Where are our brothers?" And then you see people churning out pro-Ukraine hearts. So there's this whole battle of just whose team are you on, and information does not really matter at that point anymore, I think.
One time for a very quick question.
Yes. What is the difference between mythos, fiction, and disinformation? It's a little bit difficult to establish. For instance, when some people claim that Euclid is a black Egyptian, is this disinformation?
I hate it when people give. So, for instance, when the news says this specific article was disinformation. And I'm like, I think it's impossible to declare one article as disinformation, whereas you should look at a whole system that produced that article and made it to specific. So I would like to draw
I want to say that it's difficult to
Sorry, I
establish.
have to interrupt now because we can discuss
Sorry.
this for a very long time, but we're already running out of time. I would like to thank you very much for.
Happy to be here.